I stood 3 feet behind the principal, and I could smell his cheap cologne mixed with nervous sweat. It was 90 degrees in the gym. 2,000 parents were fanning themselves with programs, but I was freezing cold. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline coursing through my veins. I looked out at the sea of maroon caps and gowns. Front row center sat the skateboard. Next to them, Mr. Henderson, the billionaire car dealership owner, and next to him, his daughter, Jessica. She was smirking. She was adjusting her valedictorian sash like she actually earned it. She didn't. I had a 4.0 grade point for 4 years. I founded the robotics club. I tutored half the football team so they wouldn't flunk out. Jessica? She spent her senior year shopping online during chem labs and paying me to write her essays. But 3 days ago, Principal Miller called me into his office and told me there was a recalculation, a glitch. Jessica was suddenly number 1. Miller stepped up to the podium now. The feedback from the microphone screeched, making everyone wince, and now Miller boomed, his voice echoing off the cheap metal rafters. It is my honor to introduce our valedictorian, a student who exemplifies integrity and hard work. Integrity. That was rich. I felt the heavy plastic of the USB drive in my pocket. It was already plugged into the AV system wirelessly. I had one thumb on the remote trigger hidden in my gown sleeve. Miller was still talking, praising Jessica, praising her father's generosity. Everyone was clapping. Jessica stood up, waving like royalty. I took a deep breath. I locked eyes with Miller's wife in the second row. Sorry, Mrs. Miller. You really don't deserve to see this, but your husband needs to learn that you can't buy everything. I pressed the button, but let me back up. To understand why I burned down my own graduation ceremony, you need to know what happened last Tuesday. Last Tuesday, I was floating. I was actually fluting. My acceptance letter to MIT was framed on my desk. I was graduating valedictorian, which meant a full scholarship to whatever state school I wanted, plus a few $1,000s from various local charities. Money was the only thing standing between me and being the first person in my family to get a real degree. I was finishing my valedictorian speech. It was cheesy but sincere. The future is ours, stuff like that. I was practicing the cadence, making sure I sounded professional, not like a nervous kid. That afternoon, I got a text from Principal Miller. My office, 3 p.m. Priority. Miller was a classic small-town despot. He had the power of a minor god within the walls of Northwood High. He knew everyone's grades, parents, and bank balances. Mostly the bank balances. I walked into his office. It smelled like mahogany polish and desperation. He didn't even look up from his desk. He was staring at a spreadsheet on his computer. Have a seat, Marcus, he said, not smiling. I knew immediately something was wrong. Miller always called me Mr. Jensen. Always. He finally leaned back, folding his hands over his gut. Marcus, you're a great kid. Best student we've had in a decade. Truly brilliant. Here comes the pivot, I thought. But we have a small situation. A data entry error. It was corrected this morning. You see, the final ranking is based on a weighted system that sometimes trips up. We had to go back and recalculate all the AP scores from junior year. I gripped the arms of the chair. And you're not number 1 anymore, Marcus. You're number 2. Jessica Henderson is number 1. I laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. Jessica Henderson? Sir, she paid me $50 to write her final history paper. It was about the Napoleonic Wars. She thought Napoleon was a Roman emperor. Miller's face went stiff. His eyes darted toward the door. That's irrelevant hearsay, Marcus. The numbers don't lie. Jessica has a weighted average of 4.51. Yours is 4.49. I stood up, slamming my palms on his polished desk. The sound made him jump. Show me the data. Show me the weighted system. I keep a perfect spreadsheet of my own grades, and I know exactly where I stand. He sighed, picking up a manila folder. It's all propadre, Marcus. School board decision. You'll still give a speech, a salutatorian address. That's still a huge honor. No, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The valedictorian spot comes with the Reynolds Scholarship. $10,000. I need that money, sir. Jessica Henderson's dad just bought the school a new swimming pool last month. Miller dropped the polite facade. His eyes narrowed. Exactly. Mr. Henderson is a pillar of this community. He's funding the new STEM lab that you and your robotics club need. A new valedictorian helps secure that funding. It's about the greater good, Marcus. He was basically admitting it. He sold my scholarship for a swimming pool. He sold my future for the greater good of his next paycheck. The bile rose in my throat. I won't do it, I said, grabbing my backpack. You have no choice, Miller hissed. You accept the Salutatorian spot, or you accept nothing. You lose your awards, your recommendations, everything. Your graduation day will be very lonely, Marcus. Think about your family. I walked out. My head was pounding. That feeling of floating happiness? It had been replaced by a sickening heavy drop. I realized that my 4 years of brutal work meant nothing against the stroke of a checkbook. I walked straight past Jessica, who was waiting in the hallway, looking smug and triumphant. She didn't even have to hide it anymore. The game was officially rigged. Now I just had to decide how to break the whole table. That night, I went home and didn't tell my parents a thing. My mother was so proud of my valedictorian status, she'd already RSVP'd for every one of my college acceptance dinners. Telling her the spot and the money were gone would crush her. I needed a day to process the rage. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat at my cheap desk, staring at the framed MIT letter, which suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I was smart enough to get into MIT, but not smart enough to outrun small-town corruption. The next morning, I went to the one person I trusted, Mr. Harrison. He was the head of the AV Club, a genius with electronics, and secretly a major conspiracy theorist. He hated the school administration almost as much as I hated Miller. They swapped you out? Harrison whispered, adjusting his thick glasses. We were in the cramped AV closet, surrounded by cables and blinking power lights. For Jessica Henderson, the swimming pool girl. Harrison didn't even look surprised. He just started plugging a series of tiny black boxes into a laptop. Henderson's dad owns the school's PR firm, too. They probably wanted a prettier face for the graduation live stream. You're too intense, Marcus. I need your help, I said. I need to prove it. I need access to the school board's email server and the principal's office network. I need proof of the transaction. You want proof or you want revenge? Harrison asked, leaning closer. I didn't hesitate. Both, but revenge first. Proof is just the exit music. Harrison smiled for the first time. It was a cold, calculating smile. The whole system runs on an ancient, patched-together Wi-Fi network. I designed the firewalls, such as they are. I know the back doors. For the next 24 hours, we lived in that closet. I wrote code. Harrison ran packet sniffers. We found nothing directly connecting the principal to a bribe. They weren't that stupid. But we found something better, the official graduation presentation. Miller's speech, Jessica's speech, the entire program, all on one server. And the audio feed for the microphone was routed directly through the projector system. This is the key, Harrison said, pointing to a small hidden network port behind the stage podium. Anything plugged into this controls the main projection and the house audio feed. We can hijack the whole show remotely. I nodded, my mind racing. A public, high-stakes ceremony streamed live across the district, a captive audience of thousands. Miller was obsessed with looking good for the cameras. We need a delivery system, I said, something discreet. Harrison pulled out a sleek black USB thumb drive. Notified for remote activation. It's got a tiny Wi-Fi bridge inside. Plug it in and it waits for my signal. It will replace the main presentation and reroute the mic feed. The next challenge was placement. The podium was never left unattended. I knew exactly when I could get to it. During the rehearsal, when Principal Miller was fussing about the flower arrangements, not the technology. I looked at the thumb drive, then at my Salutatorian gown hanging on the door. I had been planning a message of hope. Now, I was planning a public execution. I felt zero guilt. Miller deserved this, and Jessica deserved to watch it happen. The rehearsal was a nightmare of enforced boredom. Principal Miller kept adjusting the lighting, worrying that the stage looked too harsh. Jessica Henderson was constantly interrupting, complaining that the valedictorian spotlight made her look shiny. I was playing the quiet, humbled salutatorian. I sat through the whole thing, nodding, saying, "Yes, Principal Miller," and looking suitably defeated. This was the hardest acting I'd ever done. The humiliation was a raw, physical burn. The opportunity came 15 minutes before the rehearsal ended. Miller was pulled away by the board president to discuss the seating chart for VIPs. Jessica was busy taking selfies near the expensive rented flowers. This was my only shot. I walked casually onto the stage, ostensibly to check the microphone one last time. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The AV port was exactly where Harrison said it. My fingers fumbled with the panel. It clicked open. I could hear the loud, obnoxious sound of Jessica giggling nearby. I shoved the modified USB drive into the port. I stood up, adjusting my gown. Done. I gave a silent, victorious look at the stage lights. The worm was in the apple. The rest of the rehearsal was pure agony. I had to listen to Jessica's practice speech. It was written by a professional, cliché-written, self-congratulatory nonsense about reaching for the stars and how her parents taught her the value of hard work. When we finally dispersed, I saw Harrison across the gym. He gave me a tiny, almost invisible nod. The device was live. We had control. That night, I loaded the final presentation onto Harrison's laptop. It wasn't my prepared speech. It was a digital dossier. It started with a giant black-on-white title slide, a recalculation of integrity. Then, it had side-by-side screenshots. On the left, my perfect grades. On the right, Jessica's actual grades, before the adjustment, including a D in pre-calculus. The pièce de résistance was the audio. Harrison and I had spent hours editing the sound file. It was a splice of two things, an anonymous recording of Principal Miller taking a phone call about the deal. We found it buried in his voice messages, an audio clip of Jessica openly bragging about having her essays ghostwritten, which I had saved from a Discord chat months ago. I listened to the finished product. The audio was crystal clear. Miller's voice, thick with avarice, confirming the payment. Jessica's voice, grating and spoiled, confirming the cheating. I felt a dizzying mix of terror and elation. This wasn't just exposing a lie. This was destroying a powerful man's career and humiliating a billionaire's family in front of the entire community. It was irreversible. "You sure you want to go through with this?" Harrison asked, his face illuminated by the cold blue screen. I looked at the framed MIT letter again. I looked at the $10,000 scholarship that was now gone. "I'm sure," I said. "The moment Miller introduces Jessica, that's when we push the button. He gets to look everyone in the eye when the truth hits the screen." The next morning was graduation day. It felt like walking toward the electric chair, but I was the one holding the switch. Graduation morning was surreal. My mom was crying happy tears, taking pictures of me in my gown. Every smile I gave was forced, a thin mask over the absolute chaos churning inside my stomach. I was dressed like a perfect scholar, but I felt like a saboteur. I met Harrison in the AV closet 30 minutes before the ceremony started. The tension was so thick I could almost taste the copper. He had his laptop set up, shielded from view by a stack of old videotapes. "Status report," I whispered, my voice dry. "The drive is active. It's logged onto the main network bridge," he reported, tapping a key. "The presentation is ready to deploy. Once I hit execute, the original file is wiped, the new one loads, and the microphone feed is hijacked. It'll switch to the pre-recorded audio loop. How long will it run? About 5 minutes. That's enough time for the full audio clip and 3 slides of pure data. Long enough for the board to panic and the police to get involved. Police! You're disrupting a broadcast, Marcus, and exposing fraud. It won't be quiet." He shrugged. "You asked for wild. We reviewed the plan one last time. I would be on stage with the rest of the Honor Society. Miller would make his speech. When he reached the integrity part, the introduction of Jessica, that was the cue. I would send a prearranged text message to Harrison. Showtime. I walked out of the closet and into the bright, buzzing reality of the gymnasium. The ceremony started with the typical fanfare, the national anthem, some boring speeches from minor dignitaries. My name was called for some small, meaningless awards. I accepted them, forcing a grateful expression. Then came the moment of truth. Principal Miller stepped up to the podium. The entire atmosphere shifted. This was the highlight of his day, his chance to shine in front of the community and his donors. He straightened his tie. He started his preamble. He talked about the pride of Northwood. He talked about the pride of Northwood. He talked about character. Every word was a razor blade scraping my skin. I watched Jessica Henderson out of the corner of my eye. She was literally glowing. Her hair was professionally done, her dress expensive beneath the gown. She was rehearsing her own triumphant walk. She had won, and she knew it. And now, Miller said, his voice swelling with false sincerity, a student who perfectly encapsulates the values of Northwood High, a student of rare brilliance who has overcome every challenge through sheer determination and the invaluable support of a loving family. He paused, looking directly at the Henderson family, who were beaming. He was looking right past me, ignoring the student he had actively crushed. He raised his hand toward Jessica. Please welcome the Northwood High School class of 2025 valedictorian. My thumb hovered over my phone. This was it. No turning back. My heart was a drum solo. I knew my entire future, my reputation, my clean record was hanging in the balance. But the thought of Jessica stepping up to that podium, knowing the lie was too much to bear. I hit send. Showtime. The next few seconds were the loudest silence I have ever experienced. The moment I hit send, the gymnasium plunged into a weird technological stutter. Miller was mid-sentence, Jessica Hender when the audio feed cut out. Not just the mic, but the entire house sound. The giant projector screen behind the stage, which usually displayed a Northwood High logo, flickered violently. A wave of confusion rippled through the audience. People stopped clapping. Jessica froze, her triumphant walk halted mid-stride. Miller stared at the microphone in confusion. He tapped it. Nothing. He looked wildly over his shoulder at the stage manager, who was frantically pointing at the podium. Then, the screen sprang to life. My title slide, a recalculation of integrity. Go, appeared in blinding white font. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Miller instantly knew. His face went from confusion to pure, unadulterated terror. He lunged for the podium, scrambling to unplug the rogue device, but it was too late. The audio override kicked in. The speakers exploded with sound. It wasn't music or a siren. It was Principal Miller's voice, distorted and echoing, but undeniably his. Heavy sigh. Yes, Mr. Henderson. The switch is done. Marcus Jensen won't talk. His family needs the money, so he'll take the Salutatorian spot. The final figure for the new STEM lab? Yes, $20,000 will secure the valedictorian spot for Jessica. No, I don't care about her grades. I care about the contribution. The gymnasium erupted. People were shouting. The school board members stood up in unison, looking like they'd been slapped. Miller was tearing at the back of the podium, his tie askew, sweat pouring down his temples. He looked like a trapped animal. The screen changed again. Slide 2, Jessica Henderson's true grades. It showed a graphic comparison of her actual transcript versus the recalculated one. The massive failure in pre-calc was highlighted in angry red. Jessica was screaming now, but her voice was lost beneath the audio loop. She turned on me, pointing a shaking finger. You piece of trash, she shrieked. But then the final part of the audio played. It was Jessica's own voice from the Discord chat, clear and spoiled. Honestly, why would I even bother studying? Dad just writes a check and the school puts whatever grade I want. That Marcus guy? He's so desperate for the scholarships. He's basically my private tutor. He's such a loser. The entire focus of the gym shifted from Miller to the Henderson family. Mr. Henderson, the billionaire donor, grabbed his wife's arm and tried to pull her toward the exit, his face crimson with shame. A uniformed police officer, who was there for ceremony security, walked straight toward the principal. I stood on the stage, perfectly still, my gown suddenly feeling like armor. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't physically touched anyone. I had simply presented data. Principal Miller was dragged away from the podium by the board president, whispering frantic, useless protests. The live stream feed, which was still running, was now capturing an old, corrupt principal being marched off stage while the recorded proof of his crime played over the loudspeakers. I walked calmly to the front of the stage, stepped over the discarded microphone, and looked out at the chaos. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in days. I had lost the award, but I had won the war. The gymnasium doors burst open as more police officers arrived. The show was over, but the fallout was just beginning. The rest of the day was a blur of police reports, screaming parents, and school board members who suddenly remembered my name. My mom found me near the football field entrance. She wasn't crying sad tears anymore. She was furious. "Marcus, what did you do?" she demanded, grabbing my hand. I showed her the original email from Miller about the recalculation and the transcript comparison. I explained the bribe. She read everything, her face hardening with every word. "That monster sold your future," she whispered. Her voice was shaking with rage. "You did the right thing, son. That was all the validation I needed." The fallout was swift and brutal. Principal Miller was immediately placed on administrative leave, pending a criminal investigation into fraud and misuse of school funds. The audio clip we played was deemed sufficient evidence to start a serious inquiry. He lost everything: his job, his pension, and his reputation. The Henderson family was a wreck. Mr. Henderson tried to sue the school and me for defamation, but the evidence was irrefutable. His businesses started facing immediate community boycotts. The local news ran the story for a week straight. Jessica was pulled out of the school system entirely and went on to be known nationally as the stolen valedictorian fraud. She was a pariah. As for me, the school board, completely terrified of a lawsuit, called an emergency meeting. They publicly apologized to me on the record in front of reporters. They officially voided Jessica's valedictorian status, restored my 4.0 grade point average, and awarded me 2 scholarships: the Reynolds Scholarship, the original $10,000, and a special, hastily created Northwood Integrity Award for $25,000. I didn't give the valedictorian speech. I didn't want it anymore. The revenge was louder than any speech I could have written. Harrison and I never got in serious trouble. The school tried to punish us for unauthorized use of equipment, but my lawyer, provided pro bono by a local firm thrilled with the Miller scandal, argued that I was acting as a whistleblower to expose serious criminal fraud. The charges were dropped. I spent the summer preparing for MIT. The money from the 2 scholarships combined with my grants covered my first 2 years completely. On my last day in town, I drove past the high school. The new STEM lab, funded by Henderson's bribe, was still being built. The sign had been vandalized. Someone had spray painted "paid for by fraud" across the concrete. It was a beautiful monument to justice. I got in my car and drove east. I learned that day that being smart isn't just about grades. It's about knowing how the game is played and when you need to flip the board. I lost my nice, clean graduation, but I gained something much better: the knowledge that I control my own narrative, and that is a lesson worth more than any diploma.